Hello and welcome to Mr. C History. Now, the streets of London are usually quite peaceful. There aren't often people being gunned down in the streets, but there are moments when that peace is shattered. And today I want to focus on 3 murders, or specifically assassinations, people who are murdered for political reasons that have taken place on London streets. And I start here in sleepy Belgravia. This is 36 Eaton Place, Belgravia, and on the 22nd of June 1922, the MP Sir Henry Wilson was gunned down on these steps. Now, who was Henry Wilson? Well, he was a very decorated British soldier, and by 1922 he was a field marshal and he was an MP. He'd had a long career in the First World War, but also by 1922 he was the military advisor to the newly formed government of Northern Ireland. Earlier in 1922, Ireland had been divided in two, with Northern Ireland being controlled by the British in the province of Ulster and the Irish Free State known as Southern Ireland. Now, to many Irish Republicans, Henry Wilson was seen as a villain, a symbol of violence and oppression. Indeed, as part of his role as military advisor, he had set up the Special Constabulary Group, the B Specials, who were basically thugs who would go around and beat up and kill Irish Catholics in Belfast. So amongst people in Ireland, he was not popular. So in broad daylight on the hot summer's day, 22nd of June 1922, Henry Wilson was opening a war memorial at Liverpool Street Station in full dress uniform, field marshal uniform, and he got a car from Liverpool Street Station and the car drove up here. Now, there was a bit of a crowd here because I suppose there's not much else to do in 1922 but watch a field marshal get out of his car. And he got out of his car, trod up here, got to his steps, and from the crowd emerged 2 men by the name of Reginald Dunn and Joseph O'Sullivan. Now, these were members of the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. Now, they fired several shots. Accounts vary, but one account suggests that the first shots missed, and actually Henry Wilson drew his ceremonial sword and chased after them. But in the end, 6 shots were fired into his chest. The men had no escape plan. There was a melee and they fired off all their weapons and they hit his chauffeur and a policeman, but eventually they were overcome, and 2 months later, August of 1922, they were hanged. Now, what was the significance of all this? Because one Irish historian has called this Ireland's Sarajevo, linking with Archduke Franz Ferdinand in the First World War. Well, obviously the reaction in Britain was of shock and outrage. The government of David Lloyd George said this, were very angry, but actually the impact is felt much more in Ireland, or the Irish Free State, Southern Ireland. Now, I keep saying that these men were members of the IRA, which is true, but there isn't much evidence to actually link this assassination with the leadership of the IRA. It looks like these 2 men might have been acting alone. Michael Collins, the leader of the IRA, was pretty dubious about whether he was actually involved within it. And that's because the IRA, and indeed many people in Ireland, were very split at the time. There was lots of rivalries between 2 groups known as the anti-treaty group and the pro-treaty group. Essentially, their treaty was all about how close their relationship with Britain was going to be. The anti-treaty group want nothing to do with Britain. Pro-treaty said, we're going to work with them. Michael Collins was part of the pro-treaty group, and he used this assassination to tackle and take on the anti-treaty group within Ireland, which eventually boils into lots of violence on the street and a war, the Irish Civil War. So it's very interesting that the assassination of a British MP in the streets of Belgravia, there's a direct link from that all the way to the Irish Civil War. This is Caxton Hall near St James's Park tube station, and on March the 13th, 1940, Sir Michael O'Dwyer was assassinated inside there. Now, who was Sir Michael O'Dwyer? Well, he was an Irishman who climbed the ranks to become Lieutenant Governor of the Punjab, a province of India, and he was Lieutenant Governor there between 1913 and 1919. Crucially, he was governor during the Waterloo Bridge Massacre, otherwise known as the Amritsar Massacre. Now, he wasn't there on the actual day of the Amritsar Massacre, but another chap with a confusingly a similar name to him, Reginald Dyer, not O'Dwyer. Reginald Dyer ordered his men to open fire on a group of worshippers in Amritsar, and the numbers vary, but between 400 to 1,000 people were killed. It was one of the darkest moments in the British Empire. Now, as I say, Michael O'Dwyer wasn't there, but he was essentially in charge of the whole province, and rather than come out and condemn the killings, he defended them and said, no, it was the right thing to do. Those protesters were causing trouble, they were agitating sedition, that Dwyer did the right thing of going out and shooting them. This obviously caused outrage amongst the Punjab and Sikh community. 1 year later, O'Dwyer has moved away from India and has a quiet and retiring life until 1940, when he comes to a meeting here to discuss India, and just as the meeting is coming to a close, someone in the crowd within the hall stands up, a man called Sardar Udham Singh, and opens fire at point blank range on Michael O'Dwyer. He is killed immediately. It causes outrage in Parliament, but back home in India there were many people who were very pleased with this, especially in the Sikh community. This was 20 years later of revenge or justice for them. Interesting, the leaders of Indian independence, Nehru and Gandhi, they don't praise it, but they also don't condone it. But I suppose their policy is all about non-violence. But it's a very interesting symbol of the axe of an empire coming back to haunt them. Udham Singh makes no attempt at escape. He's arrested immediately, put on trial, and he says, I do not fear death. I did this for my country. This is revenge. This is Waterloo Bridge, and on the rainy evening of September the 7th, 1978, the Bulgarian journalist, writer and dissident Georgi Markov had just left his offices at the BBC on the Strand there and walking to a bus stop on the middle of the bridge, when all of a sudden he felt a little pinprick on his right thigh. He turned round and he saw a rather heavy-set gentleman pick up the umbrella and say, I'm sorry, in a foreign accent, and then very quickly that man hailed a cab and drove off into the London traffic. Markov didn't think much of it until later in the evening, when he felt a pain in his thigh and he saw a lot of swelling and all his leg was very red, and then in the morning he was extremely ill. So his wife took him to hospital, and 4 days later, on September the 11th, 1978, at the age of 49, Georgi Markov died. Well, who was Georgi Markov and what happened? Well, he had been a successful writer and journalist in Bulgaria in the 1960s, and Bulgaria in the 1960s, of course, was a communist regime, allies with the Soviet Union, and he had grown a bit weary and tiresome of the oppressive regime, so he had defected to the West, to here, to London, and he had turned his pen into a weapon, and he was writing scathing criticism of the Bulgarian regime, including the dictator of Bulgaria, Todor Zhikov. Now, the Bulgarians did not like this, and they wanted to silence this critical voice. And so with their allies, the KGB, they hatched a plan to assassinate him, which is exactly what happened here on the bridge. After he died, they did an autopsy of him, and they found in his right thigh a tiny thing the size of a pinhead, tiny little ball, in which was ricin. They'd infected him with ricin, the nerve agent, which had killed him. This was 1978, the height of the Cold War, and it caused panic amongst the community of people who had defected from communist regimes. You were not safe, they could come and get you. But it's all very James Bond, isn't it, with umbrellas stabbing, and I'm sure many writers of spy fiction have been inspired. But it did cause a great panic. You were not safe from the communists in the Soviet Union. Though London is safe, it does have its history of assassination, and I missed out some. Of course, the IRA targeting many MPs in the House of Parliament with their bombs. Spencer Perceval assassinated in the House of Commons. I did that on my video on Prime Minister's graves. And of course, Alexander Litvinenko, 2006, killed with polonium, a toxic agent, poisoned on the streets of London again by the Russian government. So these things still happen. It is still relevant. History is still being made. As always, let me know what I've missed out and anything more interesting I can say. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.